Thank you for coming. And we know that drought is affecting more people than any other disasters. Drought has indeed been a natural element of climate variability for as long as humans have been around this planet. However, what is different now is that because of climate change, the frequency and the intensity of drought is indeed changing all over the planet. And in many parts of the world, the approach to drought is reactive rather than proactive. It tends to focus on crisis management rather than on prevention. We just simply cannot afford to continue in a piecemeal mode, driven by crisis rather than being driven by prevention. We must change our thinking from reactive crisis management to proactive risk management with regards to droughts. We have the knowledge, we have the experience, we can reduce the impacts of droughts. Very few countries indeed have right now policies in place for the management of drought. And a few weeks ago, actually in March, it was organized by we, meaning the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the FAO and WMO organized a high-level panel on drought management policy. And we were graced by the presence of the Prime Minister of Niger in this event. And it led to major recommendations which will also inform our action, drive our action in the months and years to come. So today, as part of this global platform, we are very, very fortunate to have gathered a very high-level expert panel. And we have His Excellency, Monsieur Saïdou Sidibé, Minister and Director of Cabinet of the Prime Minister of Niger. We have Monsieur, please, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name, Monsieur Gedi Hussein, who is a community worker from the Wajir County in Kenya. We have Monsieur Juan Manuel Caballero, the head of the National Meteorological Service of Mexico. We have Monsieur Wadid Erian from the Arab Center of the Study of the Arid Zones and Dryland, AXAD. We have Monsieur Matthäus Hander, DRR advisor to IGAD and former director of the Early Warning and Response Directorate in Ethiopia. We have Monsieur Javier Pava, Director General of the Fund of Prevention and y Atención de Emergencias, City of Bogota. So thank you very much for being present. And we have rapporteurs, Monsieur Baz from FAO and Mrs. Bellali from Save the Children. So I've introduced very briefly the panelists. I'm going to ask each of them some very specific question, and I would like each of them to be able to answer within literally 5 minutes, so that we have a little bit of time at the end for open discussion with the room. So let me switch now immediately without further ado to French. Et je vais maintenant poser une question.
Now going to ask a question, actually two questions for His Excellency Mr. Sidibé, the Minister and Director of the Cabinet of the Prime Minister of Niger. Mr. Sidibé, Niger is one of the countries which has lengthy experience in the field of drought. And if you could perhaps tell us about your experience, your policies which you implemented in Niger, how effective they were. But beyond that first question, perhaps I could ask you another question straight away. How can you ensure and create institutional resilience, and how can you act not only at national level, but also at regional level, so that national and local action are more effective? When we talk about drought, drought knows nothing about borders, so it's really essential to take account of the regional dimension, or in any case, the sub-regional one. Minister?
The floor is yours, donc je vous laisse la parole.
You have the floor. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank you for inviting us to this session and for giving us the opportunity to submit our experience regarding drought management and its consequences rather quickly. Well, very quickly, the context. Niger is in the heart of the Sahelo-Saharan region. It's a very big country of more than 1 million square kilometers, but 2/3 of them are desert, and 1/3 also gets very little rain, which causes recurrent droughts, which are closer and closer together. It used to be every 20, 30 years, now it's every 2 to 5 years, and this recurrence of drought causes sometimes famine of some breadth, like in 2005. And also there are a certain number of consequences connected with this weakness, malnutrition, which is quite widespread among children, and also some diseases which are becoming more and more pandemic because drought regularly destroys income among the peasants, and this makes them quite weak when they have to deal with health matters. So this is a country which needs to develop ways of managing. We have a certain amount of experience. We need an information system at regional and sub-regional levels, and going right down to community level. We have 206 communes in Niger, and this system makes it possible to collect information throughout the year, during crops, after crops, before crops, and that makes it possible to set up a program which is shared with the government and partners. And this program is assessed, put into figures, financed with solidarity between the government and its partners. This program obviously integrates the aspects I've just mentioned, nutrition, and also the combat against certain diseases which are related to this phenomenon of recurrent drought. It's been quite effective, but a recent assessment has shown that it's true that it was effective in dealing with the effects of drought, but it did not help us to resist the problem. It did, in certain cases, provide an instrument for people who waited every time there were difficulties, waited to get support. And as I have said, it became necessary to reconstruct the productive apparatus several times and to spend a lot of resources in reconstruction instead of financing the development process. In 2011, a rather more structured program was designed by the President of the Republic. Came into effect in 2011, a strategy which contained mostly responses to emergencies, because all that is not going to be solved overnight. But in view of the tool we now have, the action is more structured, and there's a broad irrigation program which is to be developed. with a FAR program, a dam program, which is meant to be completed in 2016 and which will make it possible to irrigate 180,000 hectares and to produce electricity, ensure irrigation, and to develop an agro-industry. But the particular feature of this program is that it has developed a capacity to give the producers themselves, and there are two of those, an order of service to be established in each commune. There are 206 communes, and the peasants can find there the fertilizers, the tractors, whatever they need, and there are about 100 centers like that, which are to be developed. And on the other hand, and this is something very important, there is technical and professional information, not very high level, but basic, and it will help to overcome problems which we had thought that the schools should deal with up to now. Schools take children from 6 to 10 years, but then they become unemployed, and these unemployed are taken up by us, and they work by maintaining wells and other things which are important for the community. And all this together will help to overcome the problems of food insecurity and facilitate the reinsertion of the producers in a sustainable way. So very quickly, in 2012, the program was put to the test, and more than $400,000 were involved, which made it possible to do a lot of work. There was not much rain in 2011, there was not enough production, but this program did make it possible to make up the deficit and to save the cattle. We are a big cattle breeding country. We have 32 million head of cattle. So this cattle was saved, and the population had income through productive activities and transfers, which made it possible to keep the populations on their land. You've heard of the food insecurity of 2005, but not of 2012, where the deficit was bigger, but the action ensured that it wasn't felt. In 2005, people went to the cities, but when we really do give the problem due attention, you can do better. 2013 will see the continuation of the program, and $500,000 and more will be invested in it, and that's what we have to say. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. I think your experience has been particularly valuable.
May I turn now straight to Monsieur Gedi Hussein. You represent community leaders in an area in northern Kenya that suffers from chronic, recurrent droughts. So if you can share with us your experience, your role in mitigating conflict between communities over scarce resources, and also turning to the other end of the scale, if you can tell us from your perspective, how effective or indeed ineffective is the support to address drought by the international community? So the floor is yours, and please, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is, you have been told, losses from disasters, 50% of which are not even usually reported, have adversely affected livelihoods and community lifestyles occasional demands for assistance. The combination of climate change, resource scarcity, environmental degradation, etc., have compromised the life of communities, thus, necessitating the inclusion of disaster risk reduction strategies in our sustainable development. In northern Kenya, from where I come, which is a third of the Republic of Kenya, there are perennial and chronic droughts. The communities are mainly pastoral, and therefore the highest priority for a pastoralist is to get water and pasture and these are the depleted resources. So these people sometimes may travel to places like southern Ethiopia, Somalia, and then in the process come into contact with others, cause conflicts, and therefore face a lot of risks. In mitigation, therefore, at community level, we have established the following. And first of all, we have tried to educate the community through adult literacy and the campaigns. We have tried to disseminate information so that people appreciate the risks associated with the droughts and the adverse problems it causes to the communities. Thus, we have inculcated this culture of educating the community on the value or the benefit of reducing large herds of cattle, destocking, and venturing into alternative ventures to cushion them from great losses during droughts. We have also tried to go far with at least one insurance company in Kenya for livestock insurance in the event of loss so that they could be assisted. We have also encouraged livestock breeding for value addition. We have also, there are giant dams for water harvesting so that communities could practice agro-pastoral activities. Revolving funds for pastoral rollouts. By the way, we are neighboring a challenged sister state where if the youth are not capped, so we had to put in place some revolving funds to keep them busy so that they don't go astray. And we have formed very strong peace networks on which elders, intellectuals, and others sit on for wealth tracking, peace envoys to reduce conflicts among communities. They also, at the community level, are in charge of arbitration and conflict resolution, and their words are final, and they have a respected institution. They are contingency pasture reserves, so that in the event of these disastrous droughts, we have a contingency measure, a plan B for the pastoralists. And currently the government has come in, there are some irrigation schemes going on. And so we hope, our problems are not cyclones or earthquakes, our problems are mainly drought. And I think the current mitigations will go a long way in reducing our susceptibility to risks. And we have also improved the breeds for value addition so that we are at, we can read from the same script with some resilient communities. As to whether the international community has done enough as far as mitigating drought is concerned, there is a slight misconception at the community level that the international community has not done a lot. I think the international community has done a lot, and on behalf of communities, I am conveying my sincere appreciation for the efforts of the international community in intervening during our time of need. Any gap that may be there in service delivery is as a result of poor governance or poor planning at the national level and poor priority selection at the community level, because the international community comes in and works as per what's on the table for the communities and for the states. So if the entry point was wrong, I think the issue of crucifying international organizations for not doing the best is a little bit superfluous. And to that, we are saying that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, one of the strongest institutions we have are these peace networks. They are called Al-Fatah. If I will have the time, Mr. Chairman, Fatah is the closing and the opening surah of the Holy Quran. And those people, those elders, are jurists, reasonable opinion leaders who sit on them. They are under oath to do what is fair, what is just, what is good, and what is good for all. So they are the ones who go to the cross-border, engage with the communities in better places during risk times, agree with them, intercede, advise, and direct pastoralists to do what is right. And the other side, of course, they accepted it is for free on the rationale that today or tomorrow, the other side could be as needy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and being very frank. It's very helpful. Thank you. May I turn to you, Mr. Caballero? You participated recently as part of the Mexican delegation to the recent high-level meeting on national drought policy. So I would like to ask you, what experience did you draw from this, and what is Mexico doing as a result? But also, we know that the frequency, intensity of drought is going to increase as a result of climate change in many parts of the world. How does it look like from the Mexican perspective? So the floor is yours.
Primero que nada, gracias.
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to be involved in this panel. Drought is the biggest extreme weather event and the one which causes most serious consequences for cattle, for crops. It endangers food security, and it has consequences for the environment, health, and other areas. I was involved in the high-level drought meetings which were recently carried out here in Geneva, and that allowed me to realize that the United Nations, through a number of different bodies, is doing a great deal to remedy this problem. Just as the previous speaker said, there is support at the international level. That's not just for developing countries. Rather, drought affects many countries, and in the United States there's a great problem at the moment with drought, just as there is in my country, Mexico. So through the meetings which I was involved in, I saw the progress which was being made through countries such as Australia and Brazil, and I saw how regional communities have been set up to assuage this problem, for instance in Africa and in the southern hemisphere, as well as in Europe. So these have been good ways to attend to the problem. I think regional cooperation is a valuable thing. In July 2011, 86% of Mexico's territory was in a state of drought. That was a very extreme circumstance. In response to that, the Mexican government took a number of measures. On the 11th of January this year, the president of our country launched the National Program Against Drought as a governmental policy at the highest level to tackle the issue. And on the 22nd of March, the World Day of Water, the president declared a freedom for any Mexican to extract water from the soil freely. They no longer need permits to be able to engage in that act, and anyone who extracts water can do this. There's been problems related to this in the north and the center of Mexico. And now all the institutions at the governmental level have been involved in sharing information and looking at this policy at the highest level. There's also been a dissemination campaign modernizing irrigation systems, and we've also been working on rainwater capturing for domestic use. There have been developments in Mexican legislation to penalize unwise use of water. And we've been looking at garnering technical assistance from other countries. In terms of adaptations which we've done to take into account climate change, we've seen a number of scenarios for the future for Mexico, and we've seen that there will be an increase in the intensity of droughts. So we've been modernizing things at the national level to ensure that we're protected against these issues, particularly for drought. And we've been taking preventive measures earlier than we did before. So we're establishing an early warning system, for instance, for droughts. The current drought monitor is a tri-national effort with the United States and Canada. This allows us to monitor drought. We use various different monitoring systems, and we also try to build in technical assistance from Australia, Brazil, and other countries which have more experience than we do. We'd also like to employ a number of tools to improve current processes, and particularly decision-making, and to hone early warning systems in general. We want to build in a number of further organizations who are not currently involved, such as organizations from the energy, water sectors, agriculture, the treasury, the health sector, education, and the tourism sector. We're teaching a new culture of water to try to raise awareness among those in our country of the fact that this is a very scarce resource. And I say that because many people have thought in Mexico that water was an inexhaustible resource. Now we see that we have a problem with drought, and we need to raise awareness of it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. I would like, Mr. Erian, now to turn to you with a very different perspective. Can you tell us from your experience, why is it so difficult to measure drought risk? Why is it so difficult to measure drought losses? And of course, what are you doing to measure that in the Arab region? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In fact, ACSED now is working with GAR since a long time, GAR 11, GAR 13, and now for GAR 15, for modeling drought in the global and regional levels. And in reality, if we see the latest terminology from IPCC SREX report about drought, we will recognize that evapotranspiration became part of the terminology. And that means we have to shift a little bit from what we used to do as standard precipitation index to what we call standard precipitation evapotranspiration index. And this is by itself is a shift on the methodology used. But at the same time, with this methodology, we can maybe follow up for a longer time, but we need also to follow with satellite images. And this is what ACSED has introduced, but not only introducing what we call a monthly or seasonally characterization of the hazard, drought hazard, but also how to calculate in monthly, seasonally, and within a decade. Because now in the new terminology of IPCC also, we have what we call mega drought. And we would like, with our approach now we are using to add to the definition and methodology what we call frequency, calculation for a decade, intensity, and also consecutive, beside variability, because many areas in the globe facing drought, especially in dry lands areas, is under high variability. So for exposure part of from the hazard, we are dealing more with land cover, we are dealing more with transboundary rivers. This is very important because we have more than 260 transboundary river basins in the globe. And this will become a real problem for the future. We are dealing with population land degradation also, because drought with land degradation, if they are mixed in one area, it's really under more threat. And this we can recognize in Africa, and we can recognize in many places. So for vulnerability, we are doing what we call vulnerability versus capacity. And the capacity here depends on the level of the study. So if it is in the national level, it's different in the number of indicators than we do it in the local level. And we are looking for economy, social, and of course, population with it, agriculture and water availability as measure, and services and etc., education and so. For crop losses especially, this is very difficult to estimate because, first of all, we don't have enough data from countries. Countries should record and should publish more about the crop losses within the different years. This is very important because we can then relate the drought to crop losses, and this will be good modeling we are doing now for GAR 15, and we are shifting now our work into main themes. We're talking about migration, we're talking about water scarcity, we're talking about food security, biodiversity, but we are talking about conflicts. Because what the globe we know now is going to look different because drought is spreading like cancer. And you have to recognize this. And the drought will change the globe we know now. So we should act now about this, and what we recommend here is more preparedness by building resilience, by understanding better our natural resources and how to make good use of it, and where are the vulnerable areas, and how really to look for the future and plan not only under our legs, but also to see how the changes is going to be in the scenarios after 25 years and start from now. And this is very important because, again, the globe we know now is going to be changed. And by this, I think by the toolbox we are building in all our countries and efforts, we can really face the challenge. Thank you very much.
Shukran. I would like now to turn to you, Mr. Matthäus Hunde. And the notion of resilience is becoming a central discourse when dealing with drought. Now, you have experience working for the Ethiopian government and also now currently working for IGAD. So what are the changes that resilience has brought to efforts to reduce drought risk in the Horn of Africa? And my sort of follow-up question will be, besides the problem, what are the opportunities to replicate and scale up the proven disaster risk reduction initiatives and interventions? So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As we all know, because of their socio-economic longer-term impacts, droughts are by far the most damaging of all natural hazards in Ethiopia as well as in other countries in the IGAD region. So considering this situation, especially the government of Ethiopia has taken a number of steps with a view to addressing underlying causes of disaster risks and vulnerabilities, as well as to enhance its preparedness capacity in order to be able to respond to disasters and associated emergencies when they occur. So around this area, if I highlight some of major achievements that Ethiopia in particular achieved over the last few years. Now we have a policy, disaster risk management policy, which has already been formulated by revising the 1993 policy. As we all know, policy is kind of the basis for all undertakings around disaster risk management. And also the country has embarked since 3 or so years ago on profiling its risks. And the purpose of doing such a big undertaking is to inform disaster risk reduction programs at the local level, and also to customize the early warning and response system to specific local circumstances. Another important undertaking, which actually directly relating to resilience building agenda, is the largest program in sub-Saharan Africa, which is the Productive Safety Net program, being implemented as part of the government's food security program. So this program currently benefiting close to 7 million chronically food insecure people, and focusing on building resilience at the community and household level. And a number of partners are supporting the government in this endeavor. Now, this particular disaster risk reduction related program has what is called risk financing mechanism, a kind of risk management approach, which has got a number of building blocks, including the contingency plan, the capacity aspect, the early warning, and also the contingent fund. And we have what we call early warning, early LEAP, livelihood early assessment and protection kind of instrument, which also being used as a principal trigger for initiating or activating the contingency plan, which is tied to the productive safety net program, in order to protect hard-won gains, so that those chronically food insecure households are not going back to the vicious circle. Now, concerning the early warning aspect, the government is also kind of making quite a lot of efforts towards enhancing its early warning system. Very recently, the government has set up and operationalized what is called early warning and emergency coordination support, again with support with partners. And also very recently, as part of enhancing information and knowledge management, the government and also professionalization of the with a view to professionalizing the DRM workforce, the government also set up and operationalized what is called African Center for Disaster Risk Management. Now, concerning our partner support, an important undertaking being carried out not only in Ethiopia, covering some countries in the IGAD region, including Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda, is what's called the Drought Risk Reduction Action Plan, funded by ECHO. So ECHO in particular has been supporting these countries to build resilience at local level, and also to address the underlying causes of disaster risks and also vulnerabilities. Through these DRAP initiatives, countries are really aligning their efforts to the government's overall policies, strategies, which is quite important, and also documenting good practices for subsequent scale up and adoption to influence policies. IGAD has been also championing disaster risk management agenda since 2003, predating the Hyogo framework. IGAD in particular, as part of enhancing regional preparedness capacity, launched what's called Regional Disaster Response Fund, the first in our region and probably in Africa, I would say, and also launched what's called hazard maps and atlas, which including for drought for some regional major hazards, and this is very important to inform targeted disaster risk reduction programs, and also to enhance regional early warning and preparedness. So, in conclusion, all this integrated and holistic approach producing results, and a good example is that, particularly in the case of Ethiopia, the government was able to demonstrate its capability or ability to withstand and effectively mitigate effects of the 2010 and 2011 Horn of Africa
drought condition.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, finally, I would like to turn to Mr. Pava, Javier Pava, and you are working in a big city, Bogota, and I was wondering whether you could share with us what kind of policies have been established in cities like Bogota to avoid drought affecting energy, electricity, drinking water supplies. And we also know, maybe as part of this question, that there's been huge scientific progress over the last 20 years demonstrating the link between El Niño, La Niña phenomena and rainfall pattern, including drought and actually even floods. So can you tell us how you are making use of these new seasonal forecasts available for planning and acting in Bogota? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak. Bogota is in an area which we all consider to be rich in water resources, but it's also true that we've gone from a year of excess to a year of scarcity. This means that we've gone from floods to fires and disasters relating to energy. Soil-based resources have been degrading and erosion's been taking place. This has led to a number of problems which isn't related to water, namely desertification, and other problems in certain areas, which has led to an increase in vulnerability and obvious climate-related consequences. Like a number of other countries, Colombia's population has been being concentrated in a number of big cities. Bogota has more than 7 million people, for instance, and this has an impact as well. So we've seen over the past few years that a number of specific policies have been being developed relating to territory management, management of water, and risk management to be able to face climate change and variability of climate. At the national level, we've had an integral policy on water management, which has involved the issue of water scarcity, seen from the point of view of supply and demand. We're looking then to reduce pollution of our water resources. We have a great deal of supply of water. We have massive water resources, but at the same time that resource is often polluted by its very use. We've also been looking at ensuring efficient water management through plans to manage hydro basins, water basins. And that takes in all of the land surrounding the water resources and ensuring that the water can offer the necessary services to our citizens. Another issue relates to the matter of territory management involving water. Cities have a massive impact on the environment, and when we're talking about managing our land and our water resources, we're thinking about ensuring that wet areas are sufficiently managed and that water resources are managed in general, of course. We're thinking then about ensuring that drinking water gets to those areas where there is no risk, not just to the high-risk areas. And so we're not trying to change the logic behind water management. We're simply thinking about managing these resources efficiently, and we've been working on this a lot in Bogota and the surrounding area recently. We've also been looking at political measures. There's a very important political tool in Bogota, and we're talking about the fundamental right to water. The current municipal administration in Bogota has set a minimum limit for the lower levels of the population, so the poorest people in our society. We've been striving to ensure that they have access to water. This is feasible if we have economic sustainability, and the fact is that we have a public sector company which manages water resources in Bogota, and that's a very important strategy at the current time. It goes hand in hand, of course, with efficient use of water, and we need to communicate with users to ensure that they are reasonable in their use of water. Finally, we've been dealing with the issue of vulnerability reduction in aqueduct and water transmission systems with a particular perspective on resilience. Bogota has, on a number of occasions, undergone periods of water rationing. That's come about because of a lack of supply in certain regions. We have a system which integrates different water sources, and we also have the possibility of transporting water from one source to another across lands. This has led us to set up a resilience plan, a risk management plan for our aqueducts, which doesn't only mean bringing water from further away than previously. It also means resolving internal issues relating to water provision, and it also relates to subterranean water supplies. These then are the elements which I wanted to share with you today, and I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias. Thanks to the conciseness of all our panelists, we have managed to protect 12 minutes for questions. So what I would like is now to open the floor, but I would like you, when you intervene, to just very, very briefly to say which country and what is your sort of activity. It will help the panelists, and maybe you could even indicate which panelist you would like to answer. And while you are thinking to your question, just an early warning to the panelists is that at the end I will ask each of them within 1 minute to leave with us a sort of message on, in the international framework for disaster reduction that will follow the YOGO framework, what is the sort of one idea you would like with us how to better address drought risk? So you can think about this 1 minute intervention, and now let me open the floor for questions. Okay, the gentleman with the white shirt over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Maurice, working with Christian Aid in Kenya, Nairobi, as a regional emergency manager. The question I want to ask the panelists is on acting on early warning information in drought crisis, because this is something that we have really grappled with in the Horn of Africa, especially in the recent drought of 2011-2012, because the information was out there. Governments knew about it, the international community knew about it. It had been predicted that there was going to be a huge drought in Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and other areas. But the action was too late. And this is a major problem that we keep grappling with. So how do we handle the issue of early action on early warning information on slow onset disasters like drought? Thank you.
I'm looking at the panelists. I guess it's at the core your question of moving from reactive to proactive action. Anyone wants to take the question? Okay, then maybe you can start. And
thanks. Very good question. Linking early warning to early action.
And as you have rightly said, that has been our major problem in most countries in the IGAD region in particular. But steps are being taken in order to curb that problem. One is if I take the example in Ethiopia, as I said earlier, you need to build preparedness down at the local level. Unless you have the right preparedness at the local level, you will not have nothing at hand to be able to jumpstart response at the right time. So, and the early warning needs to also be customized so that it could reach the local level at the right time. So there are a number of things also, and then coordination is another important thing, which brings together a number of actors to work together and to share resources. Unless you have this happening, you cannot think of linking early warning to early action. So I mean, there are progress being made to address that problem, but a lot needs to be done as of now, and starting from the political level down to the communities themselves. So this is what I just wanted to
Merci. Monsieur le Ministre.
Oui, je voudrais
Yes, I would like to say a few words about our experience. The last speaker just talked about a coordination system, and I think that that indeed is a key point in this issue. We have a coordination organization at local level. Everybody works together once the information has been collected to see what needs to be done locally. And then this goes up to regional and then to national level. At national level too, we have a coordination instrument with all the technical and political structure, which uses the technical information, and all that is shared in coordination with our partners who support us. There are two structures, a technical framework and a political framework with the different decision makers and partners we're working with. And all this is supported by programs, preventive programs, and our major challenge is drought. So, right in the middle of the agricultural campaign, an assessment is made to see how things are developing, and a first program is produced on that basis, and then a second program is made 2 or 3 months later to validate all that, and then we have our preliminary program where actions are developed in connection with all local levels and everybody, all the actors involved to make it work. Everything works just fine, and we're able very quickly to mitigate the sufferings of the people and to ensure that food is distributed at moderate prices, and that there are small activities that can be carried out to ensure income. And if you'll just give me a couple of moments, all this still hasn't solved the problem. So we need structured programs, the structuring programs that we have, and there's an initiative to deal with this recurrent disaster situation and to have a structure to deal with the problem. And we are convinced that this is a relevant program. It's also one which we are unable to finance alone. So we do need technical and financial support. And I think our colleague from Ethiopia said before, and I'll take up his words, that he is not blaming the international community, but there is need for action. We are low-income countries for the time being, and in spite of the relevance of our program, we cannot do it alone. We are at an international conference, so this is the right place to point it out, so that everybody together can implement this program so that we don't repeat the same thing year after year. Thank you. Thank you. I think we can have another question. Mr. Caballero wants to make a comment, but a very brief one on questions of funding, following what the Minister said, and then I'll take another question.
As part of early warning systems, this information really comes from weather forecasts, and we're working to improve forecasting, particularly for droughts. In addition to that, concerning coordination, in my country, we've set up funding for disaster management through a national fund for natural disasters and a natural disaster prevention fund. In previous years, we were more reactive in our focus, and funds were sought each time a disaster occurred, including droughts. But now we're trying to look at science and technology, training and human resources to work in a more proactive way, in a way which anticipates disasters. Also, concerning agriculture, cattle and fishing, there's another fund which is emerging in cases of drought that can be used, and other types of natural disaster come in as well. And that can be a support for people in this kind of circumstance. But the main point to stress is that we're moving from reaction to proactivity, and we're also looking to harness the vast range of resources which are available, including the armed forces, and we're looking at using the media to disseminate information. A single team is being given information so that there's not misinformation or a mismatch between the information which one body has and that of another. Thank you.
Thank you. Time is running fast, so what I propose is that we take another question on this side of the room. I apologize for all those of you who have questions. What I suggest is that at the end of this session, you feel free to approach the panelists also, and then I'm sure they will be happy to answer more of your questions. So I know there are many hands here. I think the first hand I saw was the gentleman over there. Monsieur, vous avez la parole.
My name is Fran Halden. I'm a hydrology professor from Sweden. When my group has been studying droughts, for instance, by comparing drought indices, we have found that they are either totally useless or highly uncertain. The reason for this is that the data behind the calculation are insufficient or of too low a quality. Now, given the fact that the basic data for planning and decision-making are so crucial, instead of seeing an improved monitoring network worldwide, we see a constant deterioration in the monitoring network since many decades. Now, my question with this background is, given that this is probably the most cost-effective measure of all to improve the monitoring network, how can we convey the message to decision makers and politicians to actually put funding and resources into this long-term, maybe a bit tedious and boring undertaking, but which will actually guarantee that in the future we can see much better decisions, much better predictions, for instance, of drought? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I see Monsieur Erian maybe wants to take this question.
Some people are saying that each increase in temperature by 1 degree increase the conflicts in the globe by 50 times. We already had 1 degree since the middle of the last century, and already going for the second. Just means conflicts are increasing. And in reality, countries should recognize that even if you are receiving more than 1,500 millimeters annually, you still can feel drought in your country. So it means that the forest life forum is also changing. No one is far from drought, and all countries should recognize that they are on the threat of drought. And if we convince the global community and countries rich that if the problem is increasing in the poor countries, the rich countries are not far from this problem. So that will really help the international community to understand that we should advance our science and technology and use it in a better way for monitoring and early warning of drought. I think this is, if we understand the consequences for food security, and if we understand the consequences for water scarcity, and if we understand the consequences we are going to face on the global level, I think then we will really act more positively.
Thank you. And now I see Monsieur Pava wants also to add something, so the floor is yours.
I think it's very important to note that to ensure we have information, we need research institutes which move our knowledge forward. It's also important, therefore, to have national funds which ensure that monitoring and early warning systems, among others, can be in place. In Colombia, we have a national fund of that type. And in the specific case of Bogota, we do have a risk management fund. That's a fund for the citizens, and it's fueled from taxes. And it means that risk management plans can be instigated. They go from knowledge and awareness to more specific management-related practices. It's also important to have alliances, and we have a number of these in Colombia in the relevant sectors. We have alliances with the agriculture sector, the energy sector, and the aqueduct operators. These are very important areas in which to have information being passed around to ensure that we have plans to manage risk and ensure the sustainability of our business.
Thank you very much. So now, just before I hand over to the panelists for this sort of 1-minute conclusion, I will use the privilege of the chair because it's a very important point. We cannot manage what we don't observe. And this degradation of hydrologic network is indeed a major concern in many parts of the world. But I wanted to mention that a few years ago, we initiated a major program which is called the WHYCOS, World Hydrological Cycle Observing System, which is being implemented through major basins. And there are many such projects being implemented right now in Africa, in Asia, in the Caribbean, in Americas as well. So, but this is a very important issue. It has to be, hydrological observation has to be strengthened. So let me turn now back to the panelists, and for the sort of 1-minute message they want to leave with us. So protocol-wise, let me start with you, Minister, Monsieur le Ministre.
Yes, very quickly, what we want is that we have a program for capacity building and for design. And as the producers' capacities, I said before, professional information, we also want to make the local level more responsible. We appreciated that works very well when the local level takes responsibility for these questions. We also want to integrate the risks more strongly and the climatic situation, and we need financial support, coverage for a medium-term program, so that the funding of the program can be ensured. Thank you, Minister.
I'm going to now ask this intervention in the same order as the initial one. So, Monsieur Gedi Hussein, maybe the floor is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And the effects of droughts, which are very prominent in our areas, and how to reduce them. I think as the professor said, lack of reliable data on disaster trends is one of the greatest threats to rural communities, for example, in Africa, and particularly in East Africa. If we can get reliable forecasts and empowerment of local communities and informal social groupings are empowered to handle disaster risk management, the ability to bounce back will have been enhanced. If only we can have that reliable data. And there has been a tendency to keep communities and informal social groupings at the receiving end by the authorities deciding. If we could lower this and empower the communities and the social groups and give them enough capacity build them to enhance their preparedness towards disasters, I think the colossal amount of damage that always gets us unawares will have been reduced. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Caballero.
En complemento a lo que han dicho los demás
To add to what's been said by the other panelists,
yo concluiría que es
I'd conclude that it's very important that each country develops cross-cutting public policies which include all sectors, not only government bodies, but also universities and bodies from society at large, including companies, because water scarcity affects everybody. In each country, we should also bolster investment in early warning and dissemination campaigns, awareness raising, and we should channel investment towards science and technology as well. Rather than an expense, this should really be considered a good investment because it's vital if we're to protect ourselves against emergencies.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Eriane.
I would say that drylands area deserve better attention, and poor people and people living in fragile communities deserve our attention. The changing we are facing is really going faster than all the actions taken, and I think that dealing with this problem and trying to find solutions really needs people with more vision and dreamers, and we need more science and technology to help to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Matteo Sunde.
Thanks, Chair. I would say now we need to do things differently. I mean, given drought in terms of frequency, severity, and duration is on increase, so there are already proven good practices here and there, and we need to scale up and adopt them in order to be able to influence the policies. Whatever we do, we need to put communities at the center of our interventions and efforts, because they are the ones suffering from the effects of drought. And also, whatever we do, it has to be linked to the government's policy, strategy, and the plans. And coordination is also an important thing, because unless we coordinate among ourselves and also create synergies among various interventions, we may not be able to achieve the intended purpose. So that's also an important thing. Last but not least, increasing political commitment and investment in disaster risk management is also an important thing. So the more we are going to be successful around this area, the more we'll be successful in building resilience, because resilience should be seen as an outcome of disaster risk management and other sustainable development efforts. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Last, Monsieur Pava.
Considero que la principal estrategia,
in my opinion,
la sequía corresponde a tener
the main strategy for drought is to have a holistic approach to water. We need to manage water because it's a concern for all countries. We need to ensure that we can guarantee access to water for now and for future generations as well. There should be a clear effort to manage our territory and to manage development in cities and in regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we come to the end of this panel, and of course I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank also, very importantly, all of you in the room, and we heard many very important messages. I'm not going to try to summarize. There will be definitely some summary made afterwards. What I want to assure you is that the outcome of this session will feed into the chair's summary, and it will definitely feed into the follow-up action which will be taken by everyone. And I hope you found this session as informative as I did. This is not the end of this platform. This is a very important event. It's going to fit also in the YOGO framework for action number 2. So before I close, I would like to ask you to join me in thanking once again our panelists for their very valuable contribution.